Well, joining us now is former peace negotiator under Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, Gidi Greenstein. Why has Hamas rejected this deal?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. I believe that for Hamas, the issue is that the proposition of Israel is to give us the hostages, we'll give you some prisoners, but then we'll continue the war in order to demolish Hamas. And part of the issue is that there is no vision at the moment. Israel is not presenting a vision for the day after. That's why we're looking at a very kind of a small coalition is trying to be built around a small prisoner exchange deal, as opposed to a bigger vision. I think the more important aspect of this week, and perhaps a setback, is the failure of Fatah and Hamas to agree on the day after Gaza, and Fatah effectively saying or reporting that Hamas insists on remaining in power in Gaza. For Israel, this means that the war may be extended deeper into the future, and that is obviously tragic for the hostages and their families.
Right. Well, I mean, it was very much expected that meeting, those discussions in Cairo between Hamas and Fatah were essentially for show. We saw a similar meeting, with Chinese mediators, some signed memorandums that nothing came of. The U.S. has consistently blamed Hamas for the standstill in talks. Arab mediators, Qatar and Egypt, have privately maintained that the U.S. is downplaying Netanyahu's responsibility. But the question is really whether or not there's any middle ground here at this point. What will it take to close a deal? What needs to change?
I believe that for Israel, we need to keep on the military pressure on Hamas. There has to be a credible vision for the day after, primarily focusing on northern Gaza. Israel is putting in a tremendous effort in order to weed out Hamas in northern Gaza. This is basically as far as we can go in terms of establishing military control and domination in a specific area. The question is what happens next, whether Israel will be able to hand over northern Gaza to a Palestinian force, to a Palestinian entity, and or an international force that will take over that area and begin the process of the day after. We have to acknowledge that right now the government of Israel has no vision for the day after. And your previous guest spoke about UNRWA. The simple solution for the conundrum of UNRWA is actually to hand over the responsibilities and the budgets of UNRWA to the Palestinian Authority, so that the Palestinian Authority is the one that delivers healthcare and welfare services to the population. But the government of Israel wants to push out UNRWA without bringing in an alternative entity that will provide the services. And that's why we're kind of locked between a rock and a hard place, because without the vision of the day after, a lot of the immediate action is being, the sensibility of the immediate action is being compromised. I just do want to say that I was part of the only Israeli delegation to have negotiated the end of the refugee problem, including effectively the dismantling and the withdrawal of UNRWA. And a lot of the ideas that were discussed 20 years ago are relevant today. And primarily, the key to the withdrawal of UNRWA is to transfer its powers and responsibilities and resources and budgets to the Palestinian Authority. And if Israel is not willing to do that, we're not going to be able to get away to do away with UNRWA.
I mean, how could the outcome of the U.S. presidential elections impact these negotiations, and also what a post-war Gaza plan could look like? We know that obviously Trump, during his presidency, cut funding to the Palestinian Authority. And the question is, if he were to be elected, how could we expect him to essentially act on this?
So basically, I think we should look at it as a two-phase process. First, there is the period between today, effectively today, and January, when Biden is in office. He is effectively the president. He has all the powers of the executive office, and without the constraints that he was under in the last few weeks, which means that he can do significant things. The other thing to watch for is that the Saudi Arabia is leading effectively an effort to create an upgraded Arab peace initiative. So between Biden, who wants to leave a legacy, and the Saudis, who are leading this upgraded Arab peace initiative, Israel may face a situation over a 2-month period. This is a significant period in which there is a new vision that is being put forward for the day after Gaza. And that vision will be based on some principles that are very clear. That Gaza and the West Bank are a single territorial unit, which is one of the founding principles of Oslo. That the Palestinian Authority will be the governing, reformed and upgraded, will be the governing body of Gaza. That the PLO is a single is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinians. That security forces, Palestinian security forces, should be the ones who are on the ground managing Gaza when Israel hands over the responsibility. Of course, security forces that are approved by Israel and by the Americans. So we do have a 2-month window in which significant things could happen. And then we're talking about the next administration. Harris, I believe, initially will be more like Biden. Maybe a little bit more pressure on Israel, but basically it's going to be the same policy for the first few months. She has other big things that she is focused on. I'm not sure she has the ability to change course relative to Biden. But on Trump, we have to remember the following thing. Trump put forward the so-called Trump plan in January 2020, in which he presented a kind of a vision for permanent status. And the precondition for the vision for permanent status that Trump presented is the removal of Hamas from Gaza, which means that actually it's President Trump, if he comes into power, is the one that has a vision for the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I would urge you, your audience to stay tuned, and there could be interesting surprises where Trump basically going to Israel, going to Netanyahu, saying to Netanyahu, Mr. Netanyahu, you co-authored with me the Trump plan. The precondition was removal of Hamas. We're nearing removal of Hamas. Let's go ahead with the plan that you co-created with me.
All right. Well, obviously, Gidi, we're going to have to wait and see who ultimately wins this election. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, giving us your insight. We'll see what happens tomorrow.